Hello and welcome to the I Can Do podcast with Benjamin Lee. We're here to talk about tips and strategies to have an I Can Do mindset. Life is what you put into it. Get the most you can. Here's your host, Benjamin Lee.
It is Money Monday. Today we're talking more about the psychology of money. I want to share some more thoughts from this book, The Psychology of Money, Timeless Lessons on Wealth, Greed, and Happiness by Morgan Housel. I mentioned it last week in our episode on last Monday. I wanted to share a couple of thoughts with you that I think will be good for all of us to keep in mind, that getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. That's the title of chapter 5, Getting Wealthy versus Staying Wealthy. And one of the big takeaways from this chapter is that there's tons and tons of books that are out there about becoming wealthy, about how to make money, how to make a lot of money. Go to YouTube, go to TikTok, whatever the case may be. But being consistent with not messing up our financial situation is a big take-home point that the author drives home. He goes on to say at the beginning, he says that there are a million ways to get wealthy and plenty of books on how to do so. But there's only one way to stay wealthy, some combination of frugality and paranoia. He said that's a topic we don't discuss enough. I was talking to my family here a couple of days ago, and I just mentioned to them, don't be surprised or something's going to happen within the next 5 years. We had the pandemic in 2020, had 9/11 in 2001. We had the housing market that crashed in '06 to '09, somewhere around that time frame. There are a lot of different scenarios that are going to happen. And so I think what he's saying here is something good for us, that we work hard to make money, and wealth can be defined in a lot of different ways for different people. But to stay wealthy requires some combination of frugality and paranoia. He talks about getting money is one thing, keeping it is another. I liken that to losing weight. There are plenty of books out there to how to lose weight, to know how to lose weight, but the key is, can we keep it off? In Bill Phillips' book, Eating for Life, I believe, he talks about how 95% of people eventually regain the weight that they lost. I have been guilty of that before. And I think it's the same thing when it comes to money. Morgan Housel says on page 59, if I had to summarize money success in a single word, it would be survival. That's a thought-provoking statement, that money success for some is 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, but it's about survival. How much of this money can we keep? Think about the examples of athletes. The fact that they make 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 million dollars in a few short years, they don't have any money left. And so as we think about success with money, this idea of survival becomes really important. Part of this is going to be keeping debt low, staying neutral, guarding our reputation. All of these things I think can help us when it comes to this survival mindset. Now, in the book, the author gives 3 thoughts about applying the survival mindset to the real world. He says that essentially it comes down to appreciating 3 things. Number 1, more than I want big returns, I want to be financially unbreakable. And if I'm unbreakable, I actually think I'll get the biggest returns because I'll be able to stick around long enough for compounding to work wonders. And so he goes on to say, no one wants to hold cash during a bull market. They want to own assets that go up a lot. You look and feel conservative holding cash during a bull market because you become acutely aware of how much return you're giving up by not owning the good stuff. Say cash earns 1% and stocks return to 10% a year, that 9% gap will gnaw at you every day. But if that cash prevents you from having to sell your stocks during a bear market, the actual return you earned on that cash is not 1% a year. It could be multiples of that, because preventing one desperate, ill-timed stock sale can do more for your lifetime returns than picking dozens of big-time winners. He says compounding doesn't rely on earning big returns, merely good returns sustained uninterrupted for the longest period of time, especially in times of chaos and havoc, will always win. So the goal he recommends is not wanting big returns, but the idea of wanting to be financially unbreakable. Number two, this idea of survival, he goes on to say, planning is important, but the most important part of every plan is to plan on the plan, not going according to plan. Planning is important, but the most important part of every plan is to plan on the plan, not going according to plan. That has great application with public speaking. I did a sermon yesterday at the time of this recording. The microphone didn't work, made a big popping sound. I typically like to walk around. It just didn't work out. So you have to pivot. You have to plan on certain things working, but also not working. I think he really brings some real world common sense here. And this is where having an emergency fund, having extra cash, having a couple of months of of money to live off of becomes really important. He says a plan is only useful if it can survive reality, and a future filled with unknown is everyone's reality. A good plan does not pretend this was not true. It embraces it and emphasizes room for error. The more you need specific elements of a plan to be true, the more fragile your financial life becomes. If there's enough room for error in your savings rate that you can say, it would be great if the market returns 8% a year over the next 30 years, but if it only does 4% a year, I will still be okay. So he says many bets fail not because they were wrong, but because they were mostly right in a situation that required things to be exactly right. Room for error, often called margin of safety, is one of the most underappreciated forces in finance. It comes in many forms: a frugal budget, flexible thinking, and a loose timeline, anything that lets you live happily with a range of outcomes. We understand this with driving from point A to point B. If something starts at 10 a.m. and it says on the GPS that it takes 30 minutes to get to that event, and we leave at 9:30, there is no room for margin. Everything has to go perfect. How often does that happen? Traffic jam, crash, red lights, forgetting something, people just driving slow. This idea of margin is something really important. It's important with finances, it's important with our calendar, it's important with travel. And so, what he is emphasizing is something that's very real world. Plan, that's very important. But the most important part of every plan is to plan on the plan, not going according to plan. Number three, a barbelled personality, optimistic about the future, but paranoid about what will prevent you from getting to the future, is vital. Optimism is usually defined as a belief that things will go well, but that's incomplete. Sensible optimism is a belief that the odds are in your favor, and over time, things will balance out to a good outcome, even if what happens in between is filled with misery. And in fact, it will be filled with misery. You can be optimistic that the long term growth trajectory is up and to the right, but equally sure that that road between now and then is filled with landmines and always will be. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. So, those are three common sense ways of staying wealthy. It's not just about getting wealthy, but it's about staying wealthy. It's about holding on to what we currently have. There will be good times, there will be bad times, and maybe we could sum it up by just saying what our grandparents or other people in our family would used to say: prepare, save up for a rainy day.